Okay, guys, what's up, guys? Tonight's class is entitled, or tonight's lesson is called Exploring Past Perfect Time Expressions. This is part 2 of our Past Perfect series. So in our first Past Perfect lesson, we learned that the past perfect is a grammatical tense that talks about past events in sequence. It's used to order past events, and the past perfect tense is used to emphasize an action that happened prior to another. So we're talking about the order of events in the past tense. So we're going to focus on an action that happened prior another action or before another action. So that's what past perfect is about. It's the past of the past, if you'd like to see it like that. And today we're going to explore the time expressions already, yet, and still. And we're also going to explore the time expression phrase by the time. So let's get started. We're going to explain on the board here. The topic of our lesson is going to be movie night. We're going to talk about a girl called Sarah who had planned a movie night together with friends, and we'll use that as the context for our conversation. We are going to have 6 paragraphs on the board that will describe the sequence of events in the past tense. We're also going to use this visual, this timeline here at the very top of the board to order the events in sequence as they occur. Okay, so we got more or less 10 events. So our focus, like I said, is in the past tense. We'll be ordering the past events because that's what past perfect is for. Let's get started. We're gonna begin by first. I'm gonna start first by just reading the paragraphs on the board, and then we're going to read it faster, and then we'll identify the verbs in the past tense and start the order sequence, and we'll finish discussing the time expressions. Let's get started. So let's start over here. Number 1, paragraph number 1. So Sarah and her friends had planned a movie night for this weekend because they didn't spend much time together. By the time the weekend arrived, she had already prepared everything at her house. 3, she had made a pizza and bought snacks before her friends came. 4, the movie was a movie they hadn't seen yet, but Sarah couldn't resist the temptation to watch it. 5, by the time her friends arrived, Sarah had already seen the movie, but her friends still hadn't seen it. 6, Sarah pretended she hadn't seen it yet and convinced her friends during the whole movie. She never told her friends about it. Okay, good. Now, I just noticed, guys, that I forgot here a verb. Let me see. Your friends planned a movie last night because they didn't spend much time together. By the time the weekend, I just wrote the week. Let me fix that. By the time the weekend arrived, she had already prepared everything. Okay. All right. Now it's complete. I need a little bit more space here. Let's write this sentence again. Everything at her house. All right, let's read it one more time now. Okay. All right, guys, we're gonna begin by reading the paragraph. We're going to read it slowly, and then we'll discuss the different verbs, and we'll wrap it up with the time expressions. Let's get started. Number 1, Sarah and her friends had planned a movie night for this weekend because they didn't spend much time together. 2, by the time the weekend arrived, she had already prepared everything at her house. 3, she had made a pizza and bought snacks before her friends came. 4, the movie was a movie they hadn't seen yet, but Sarah couldn't resist the temptation to watch it. 5, by the time her friends arrived, Sarah had already seen the movie, but her friends still hadn't seen it. 6, Sarah pretended she hadn't seen it yet and convinced her friends during the whole movie. She never told her friends about it. Okay, great. Now let's read it a little bit faster. Starting here at number 1. Sarah and her friends had planned a movie night for this weekend because they didn't spend much time together. By the time the weekend arrived, she had already prepared everything at her house. She had made a pizza and bought snacks before her friends came. The movie was a movie they hadn't seen yet, but Sarah couldn't resist the temptation to watch it. By the time her friends arrived, Sarah had already seen the movie, but her friends still hadn't seen it. Sarah pretended she hadn't seen it yet and convinced her friends during the whole movie. She never told her friends about it. Okay, there you have the story. Now, let's go into each paragraph. Let's discuss the past tense events and let's order them in this timeline. Let's start with number 1. Okay, so number 1. Sarah and her friends had planned a movie night for this weekend because they didn't spend much time together. So how many past tense events can you see in paragraph number 1? Can you see them? There are actually 2.
Yeah, had planned.
You got it. So we have 2 past events. Very good. Had planned. And what was the other one? Didn't spend.
Yeah.
You got it. Now, do you guys remember from our past sessions which action comes first or which happened earlier? Because something happened earlier and something happened later. What happened earlier? Had planned or didn't spend much time? If you chose had planned, you're correct. So had planned happened earlier. Happened earlier and didn't spend much time. Happened later. Okay? Happened later. So
happened after.
Yes, happened after. You could say that too. So you could say that this is number 1 and this is number 2. So remember that the past perfect verb is the verb that's going to have the auxiliary had. So had here is working in as an auxiliary plus a past participle verb. Here we have a regular verb, which is planned. So the verb that contains the auxiliary had and the participle is the action that happened earlier or the action that happened prior or before, or in this case, first. So here we're going to put here plan, right? And it makes sense because when you do something with friends, get together, you generally plan, right? First, there's the planning, and then there's the actual event or thing that you're going to do. So it makes sense. And didn't spend much time together. We're going to put here spend time. We're just going to put the verb spend. Okay.
Yeah, on first day you prepare, you plan, and after you match or put a date, right?
You got it. Yes. First the planning and then you put the dates and everything. Absolutely. Good one. Okay, let's check out number 2, guys. By the time the weekend arrived, she had already prepared everything at her house. Okay? So what happened first? How many verbs do we have here in the past tense? How many events or things happened in the past? Can you see? Here's one.
Right.
Okay. And the other one?
And she had already
prepared.
yeah.
Yes, exactly. Kind of erased the little D here. Yeah, exactly. Now the question is, which of the 2 events happened first? Or which of the 2 events happened earlier? What do you think?
The previous was she already prepared, right?
That's right. She had already prepared. This happened before. This happened earlier. Okay? And then the weekend arrived. Right?
Because
exactly.
already was planned.
It was already planned. Perfect. So here, this happened in our sequence. It's going to happen third, and this happened fourth. So let's put it in our events here. So third, we have prepared, right? And 5 and 4, arrived. So arrived and prepared. So she did preparation and arrived. All right, awesome. Let's go to paragraph number 3. In number 3, we have, she had made a pizza and bought snacks before her friends came. How many past tense verbs can you see there? Or how many past events do you see?
Had made.
All right, that's one. Good job. And the other one?
The other one before.
Mm-hmm.
And both snacks before.
Okay, but okay, yeah, but this one is attached because we got a conjunction.
Yeah.
So we could say that these are the same. And the other one, do you see it?
Friends came.
Yes, came. Okay, so this would be one event. Had made and bought is one, and came is the other one. The question is, which happened first? Which happened first? What do you think?
Had made pizza.
That's right. That happened
because-
first.
Yeah, because they said explicit before, right?
Exactly. We have past perfect, so this occurred first, the auxiliary and the participle, which means that the friends came after, right? So she prepared the pizza, made it before her friends had arrived. So let's put it here on the timeline. Just gonna use the base one here. So number 5 would be makes a pizza, right?
Made pizza and both snacks.
Oh yes, and bought. Let's put both of those. And let's put by. Let's just put it in the base one. Number 6 would be friends came, right? Friends come. Okay, let's go to number 4. So the movie was a movie they hadn't seen yet, but Sarah couldn't resist the temptation to watch it. So how many past tense events do we have?
Was a movie.
Okay, yes, we got a movie. Was a movie. The other one? Hadn't seen.
Hadn't seen. Yeah.
Hadn't seen yet. Exactly.
Yeah.
And the other event? Couldn't.
Couldn't resist.
Couldn't resist. Okay, perfect. So the question is again, which of the two events happened first, or which of the two events happened earlier? Which happened earlier? Because this
Sarah
is
resist.
attached. This phrase this is all one idea. So this is all one.
Yeah.
So what happened
couldn't
first?
resist because they said but, right?
Mm-hmm.
By the but.
Okay, okay. Now, do you remember what we said about the past perfect? It's always the past perfect verb is always the one that happens first. So in this one, the scene has the past perfect verb. So this came first, right? They hadn't seen it. Nobody had seen it, including Sarah. So at this point, including Sarah, nobody had seen it yet, right? However, right? But she couldn't resist. Right? She couldn't resist her temptation to watch it. So eventually she watched it. So, nobody saw it, but she couldn't resist. She couldn't control herself. So that is number 7. So let's put number 6 as seeing the movie, right? And can't resist watching it. Can't resist watching it. Okay, let's go to number 5 now. Hold on. What happened here? This why I got carried away. There it is. By the time her friends arrived, Sarah had already seen the movie, but her friends still hadn't seen it. Let's take a look here. Actions in the past. We got arrived.
And Sarah had
already seen. But her friends still
hadn't seen
it. Still.
Yeah, with the still.
Yes, still hadn't seen it. Okay, so here we got several things happening over here. We're going to need to expand this timeline a little bit because we got more events. Let's put the present here. Okay, so number 9 is going to be over
Sarah
here.
Had
already seen the movie. You got it. Now the past perfect verb is always first, right?
Yeah.
So she had already seen it. So she saw it. And what happened then? Her friends arrived.
Their friends arrived, yeah.
That's right. Number 11 would be?
And still hadn't seen.
Right, not see the movie yet. Okay, perfect. Let's go to 6 over here to finish up. So Sarah pretended she hadn't seen it yet and convinced her friends during the whole movie. She never told her friends about it. Okay, so can you see the past, the verbs in the past?
Hadn't seen yet.
Yes, that's right. She hadn't seen it yet. And convinced, which is...
Convince her friends.
This is the same because we got a conjunction. We're connecting.
Yeah.
So it's the same. It's the same. During the whole movie. And she never told her friends about it.
She never told. Yet.
Never told. Okay, perfect. So let's continue ordering here. So over here, we had number 7. Here we had number 8. So this is number 9. Number 10. 11. That's going to be what? 12 and 13.
13. Yeah.
Wow, we got 13 things going on here. That's good. Let's put them over here. So 12, 13, let's say. So 12 will be not seen and convinced and not told. Not told everyone. That's going to be 12 and 13. So there you go. Complete. We completely ordered everything. The sequence of events. Everything started with an idea. Way in the past. Everything always starts with an idea, right? So everything started with a plan. Somebody, she had the idea. She had the plan, right? She was the one that put together all of these other events that happened in the sequence. So let's do a recap of everything that happened in the past. Let's go to the past now. Let's travel to the past. So everything happened. It started with an idea that Sarah and her friends conceived or had to plan this movie night together because they didn't spend time together. So they didn't share time together. So this was going to be the way to have everybody together. Eventually she did her preparation, right? Yes. Eventually she prepared. Yes.
Plan. Yeah.
Before anybody came, right, or arrived. In her preparation, she made and bought. She made a pizza and bought snacks before her friends came. Now the real plot. This is the plot of the story, right? This is the unexpected event that happened here in number 4. So the movie was a movie they hadn't seen yet. So nobody in the group had seen this movie. Okay. And here we've got the real plot going on, right? But Sarah couldn't resist the temptation to watch it. So number 7, right? Right? She couldn't resist the temptation to watch it. And this is where we have the plot. This is the real plot of the story, or the unexpected turn of events was this. Nobody was expecting for her to watch the movie. Come on. It was supposed to be a special thing, right? That was the whole plan. The whole idea was about that. But she didn't go according to plan herself. She couldn't resist, right? She had to watch it. And now, nobody, Sarah had already seen it, right? And her friends, when they arrived, right? Her friends arrived, they hadn't seen it yet. That was number 11. Number 12, she pretended, right? She was pretending, she was faking that she never saw the movie. So she was like, oh, wow, acting surprised and laughing at the jokes. Like it was like the first time she saw the movie. So she was pretending that she hadn't seen it, and obviously did a good job convincing everybody during the whole movie. And eventually, right, she never told them. She never told her friends about it, how she managed to do that. So there you go, guys. That's the complete order. Now, let's move on now to the expressions of time that were used in the story. Okay, there are basically three that we're going to focus on. We're going to have already, which in Spanish means ya, already, ya. Yet, which in Spanish means todavía, and still means aún. Let's see the uses. So for already, which means ya, we're going to use it only with affirmative tenses, solo only in the affirmative. And the idea of already is we're talking about something that's completed or finished or done. So in this example, you can see she had already prepared everything at her house. So she finished the preparation. It was already completed. It was done. Okay. So Sarah had already seen the movie, but her friends still hadn't seen it. So it was already seen. It was already, she had already watched it. She completely watched it. It was finished. The action was completed. Let's go to yet. Yet means todavía, and we use yet only for negatives. So only in the negative and for questions. Now, when we use yet, we're talking about something that is not completed or not finished, and something that's not completed or not finished. So going back to our example, we've got number 4, paragraph 4. The movie was a movie they hadn't seen yet. So nobody none of her friends had seen it yet. So it was something that they've never completed, never done before, right? So that's how we use yet. Now with still, which means aún, we only use still with a negative, not in questions, not in the affirmative, only with negative statements. The use of still is basically to emphasize that something is not yet completed, something that you assume to be completed and finished, right? It's something that you assume that it's completed and finished, but you're surprised. You want to emphasize with the word still why it hasn't been completed, because you assume, you expect that it's finished, right? So that's what you're doing. So here in going back to this example at paragraph 5, it says here, Sarah had already seen the movie, but her friends still hadn't seen it. So here we're emphasizing the fact that, our main protagonist of the story, Sarah, had already seen it, but everybody else still hadn't seen it. So we're emphasizing the hadn't seen it here part, right? The idea that nobody had not yet been able to see it. Okay, so those are the three time expressions that we're going to focus on. We're going to discuss the place in the sentence, the word order where they're used. So just to recap, the time expressions already, they mean ya, which is affirmative, only completed actions and only in the affirmative tense. Yet means todavía for questions and negative, and it's for something that's not finished or something in action that's not completed in the past. Still means aún, and it's only used for the negative tense, and it's also for an action or an event that is not completed in the past, but we're using still to emphasize because we're assuming or we had expected that this would have been finished or completed, this action or activity. So now we're going to go to the syntax of those time expressions, and we'll also take a look at the other time expression, by the time. By the time is a common time expression or time phrase that we use a lot with past perfect. So by the time the weekend arrived. Okay, so it could be, you could say that at the moment, right? At the time, right? Or, at that moment that the weekend arrived. So by the time, that's what it means here. Here's another one. By the time her friends arrived. So this, we're going to talk about the structure with by the time because usually we introduce a simple past verb. Okay, so let's explore a little bit further the syntax and the grammar. All right, fellas, let's explore how to use the time expressions and let's focus on the syntax, on the word order. For already, yet, and still, we're going to go step by step and I'll show you the syntax, the proper syntax that you need to use. Now, remember that a syntax is like a formula. Like I've always said, it's like an Excel formula. Everything needs to go in the proper order, in the proper sequence. And English is like when you're speaking English, it's you're putting everything in order, like a formula. In the case of already, which means yeah, we're going to use it only for affirmative, right? When we're talking in affirmative sentences and for completed events in the past, completed actions, things that have been finished, already finished or completed. So the syntax that you're going to use, the most common syntax is this one. This is the most accepted, right? The most accepted. Number one. And the second is for emphasis. Okay, but it's also available. Let's use the most accepted one, or the most common application is this one. Number one, you're going to start with the subject plus the auxiliary had. That's going to be our auxiliary verb, plus the time expression or the adverb already, plus the past participle verb. An example of this is this sentence. Sarah had already seen the movie. So here you can see the subject clearly. Sarah had auxiliary already, which is our time expression, or the adverb already, and the participle seen. The rest is complement. Okay. So this is the most common application that normally we would use with already. That's the position. We can't put it somewhere else before or something like that, right? Now over here, this is the second structure. It's used for emphasis, to make it more dramatic, to emphasize something. So here it is. So we'll have subject plus had, auxiliary plus participle plus already at the end. An example of this would be Sarah had watched the whole movie already. So here I'm using the already at the end to emphasize the whole idea. Okay. The structuring, see it here again. Subject, your auxiliary, watched. This is the verb in the past participle. Okay. It's a regular verb, so the past participle is the same, ed. Everything here is going cool as the complement. And here we have our time expression or the adverb at the end. This is mostly for emphasis, right? Only when you want to emphasize. Your tone of voice should also be the proper tone of voice to emphasize the idea. So Sarah had watched the whole movie already. So I'm emphasizing that idea. Okay. Okay, guys. So that's the purpose of already, to talk about completed actions in the past. Okay. So how do you see it? Are we good? Yep. Okay, perfect. Let's move on now to the yet. Okay. Can I erase this? You guys got it? I'll take a note if you want.
I got it.
Okay, awesome. Take a little picture too. For the guys that didn't make it. Okay, good. Now, let's go to the yet. Okay, so that's the structure. You guys can check it out in the materials as well. Now let's see the yet. All right. Okay, let's talk about yet. Okay. Very well. Okay, okay. All right, let's move on now to the time expression yet, or the adverb yet, which means todavía. We're going to use it for negative and questions and for past events that are not finished, not completed. Let's use the first structure. So here we're going to use the subject plus the had auxiliary plus past participle. And this is going to be the most common for yet at the end. That's going to be the normal position of yet. Okay. One thing I didn't check. We're talking negative. So the auxiliary, let's place it in the negative.
Sure, because for instance, Mark hadn't
You
eaten
got it.
yet, right?
Exactly, because it's not finished. Okay. So the yet, which is todavía, the syntax will be subject plus hadn't plus past participle plus yet. And this is going to be the common position. That's where you commonly going to put it. The other option is to put it in the in between. So here you could say subject, hadn't yet. This is more formal. Hadn't yet plus past participle. Okay, let's give you some examples. They hadn't seen the movie yet. Normal position. Now a bit more formal. Let's say the contract had not yet been signed. Okay. So this is like the most common use of yet. It's casual. However, when we put the yet in the middle, in between the auxiliary, the negative auxiliary, and the participle, here, it's formal. It even sounds very formal, right? Look at the context. Here we're talking about a contract, and here we're talking about a movie, right? So the contract had not yet been signed. It's just more formal. Okay, guys? So let's note that for the position. At the end or in between the negative auxiliary and the participle. And that's how we're going to use yet. Let's also take a look at the question because we have the option to also use a question. So let's say you're gonna start in the question, you're gonna start with the auxiliary had plus the subject plus the participle, the past participle, and the yet at the end. In questions, the yet at the end, guys. Okay. So let's say, had Sarah seen the movie yet? Formal, right? At the end. So had Sarah seen the movie yet? Let's say, had the contract been signed yet? So there you go. In the question form, we'll put the yet at the end of the question structure. Okay, guys? So that's how you use yet. Both for negatives and questions. In the negative, at the end, most common, casual. For more formal speech, in between the negative auxiliary and the participle. And for the question, at the end. For both instances, formal, informal, at the end. We put the yet at the end, okay? Cool. And now let's explore still. Let's take a look at still. All right, team, let's take a look at the adverb still. Still means aún. The thing about still is that we're only going to use it for negatives. Only the negatives. No questions, no affirmatives. And the idea of still is that it's going to be used to talk about a past event that is not completed, not finished. But the idea of still is to emphasize that the action is not completed. And we're a little bit surprised because it's something that we expect, that we have expected that it would be completed. So we're surprised that, come on, I mean, it's not done yet. It's still not complete. So that's the idea of still. In terms of the syntax, this is what we're going to use. It's very peculiar here, so you need to pay attention to where you put still. We have subject plus still, plus the negative auxiliary hadn't, plus past participle. Yes, I know the other ones had a more common placement in the sentence. However, still, just make sure to put it before the auxiliary. While the others, the already and yet, we use them. While the others already and yet, we use them between the auxiliary and the participle, or at the end, at the end of the sentence. But still, it's going to go before the negative auxiliary. So just watch that one. Here's an example for you. It says here, she still hadn't finished the project after working on it for 3 months. So here we're kind of surprised, right? We're kind of surprised. The project was for 1 month, right? But after 3 months, she still hadn't finished the project. So we are emphasizing this over here. We're emphasizing that the fact that she hadn't finished. I mean, it was expected to be completed 2 months ago, but she still hadn't finished after working 3 months on it, you know? So we're surprised, we're being emphatic about it. And it's kind of like a negative feeling too. You kind of get like a negative feeling because, you know, what's wrong with her, you know? We're emphasizing that there. Next example, when we arrived, they still hadn't signed the contract. Wow. So we were expecting, right, that the contract would be signed by the time that we got there, so we just go home early. But turns out that when we arrived, they still hadn't signed the contract. In fact, they still hadn't read the contract. In fact, they still hadn't been called by the lawyer, you know, and on top of that, they still hadn't decided whether or not to sign it. So we were completely lost there, completely shocked. Okay, so still hadn't. So again, still hadn't signed. So here we're going to use the still to emphasize, to make emphatic that action. And that's the only position of still. In the sentence, you can't put it anywhere else. So that's it. Only one option to use the still. Okay, guys? So that's it. Remember the position before the auxiliary. Talk about something that's not completed, and you want to emphasize a lot because you're surprised that it's not completed. Okay? And the last one before the break. Okay, guys, let's wrap it up with the last expression for past perfect, talking about past events. It's going to be the preposition by, or by the time plus simple past tense. Let's take a look. So let's take a look at the first example. So by the time the guests came, we had already eaten dinner. Or by the morning, the men had already built the house. Let's take a look at the first expression here. So by is a preposition, right? It's a preposition that means at the moment, or at you know, at the moment, or at the moment something happened, you know, at the moment something happened or something occurred. In this example, by the morning. So at the morning, or at the time of the morning, you know, at the time of. So that's what this by means, okay? You know, at the time the morning came, right? At the time the morning, or at the time of the morning, the men had already built the house. So we use this by to introduce a phrase here. Here, the morning is going to be a time expression. This is a time expression, right? Just like with simple past, let's say in the simple past, we say yesterday, last week, last night. With this by and a phrase, some kind of time, we introduce time. We place time. We put a point in time. So by the morning, by the weekend, by the afternoon, by the year 2017, Facebook had already acquired WhatsApp. Okay, so that's just one that came right now. So by 2017, Facebook had already bought WhatsApp. Okay, so here by 2017 is that time expression. It's going to put us in time, in the past. It's going to put us somewhere in the past, and it's a phrase. It's just a phrase. It's a phrase. It's a phrase that puts us in past, and it's good because it puts us in an event in the past, because in the past perfect we use two events. So the phrase by will already place us somewhere in the past, right? Which will allow us to introduce the past perfect, right? The had already bought. So it's a great phrase to introduce the past perfect, okay? Even though I'm not using a verb here, but I'm placing the idea of the time. So here by 2017, of course, is different from today. So that's how we use by. The second phrase is the phrase by the time. So we use the full phrase plus the simple past. And we use a comma to separate it from the past participle phrase, the past perfect phrase. So here's the example over here. It says, by the time the guests came, we had already eaten dinner. So the phrase here, by the time plus the simple past here came. So we use by the time plus a simple past clause, right? By the time we use this in combination with the simple past to introduce. Here we're separating the past perfect, which is over here, the past perfect phrase, sentence. Had already eaten, okay? So this is another useful phrase. So we could say, by the time the guests arrived, we had already finished the food. By the time the guests knocked the door, we had already prepared the table. So it's a great way to introduce, right? To introduce the past perfect. And it situates us, it puts us in time. So by the time the guests came, puts us here, we had already eaten dinner, right? Because the past perfect always happens first, okay? So there you go, guys. Those are the time expressions, full time expressions that we'll use with the past perfect. We're going to do a bunch of activities and exercises for you guys to solidify this concept tonight, okay? That's it, guys.